It's 5 a.m. and somewhere in 100 billion galaxies and 100 billion stars in each galaxy, numerous Buddhas are communing with us right now. And helping us to think about what is the problem with the human condition now. I would say it's scientific nihilism. There seems to be a fad now for the new atheism for the last 10 years or so. I kind of grew up in the New Age era movement of the 70s and 80s. And it's really kind of a shock to see the new atheism movement after we'd come out of like 100 years of the horror of scientific materialism, which led rise to Marxism and the human atrocity of mass slaughter and mass imprisonment of Stalin or Pol Pot, thinking there's no consequence to such action because the naive view of scientific materialism, we're all so insignificant, any action has no eternal consequence for us. But what if the scientific materialism is just the naive view? But it seems to be still prevalent in science. Since science seems to be, the way to succeed in science, to become authority, is basically to become an idiot savant. It's a selection process for idiot savants. You get these people who you have to basically be a genius and obsessed to the point of OCD to make any contribution to any field, to get to the point of mastering the background or making a contribution. And then you're taken as an authority on ultimate reality, which is just so absurd. So now we have scientism and the idiot savant. And so few have read Newton or Darwin in the original. You could go through an entire scientific education and never have read Newton or Darwin in their original writings to appreciate their faith and how their genius inspired their faith. So, of course, the main example of nihilism in science is galaxies, or the amazing study of space and the vastness of space. It is really hard to comprehend, and it really makes one feel small. But yet most astronomers, do they ever comprehend it in the sense of grokking it? Even though they study it their whole life, they're sitting in the basement looking at a video monitor after some computer has spent trillions of operations processing this collection of photons gathered on a CCD, and the astronomer in the damp basement somewhere down deep under the telescope looks at what the computer has shown them on the screen. Is that understanding the vastness? But so it's true, it's really hard. We're human to see how insignificant we are on the scale of length, or on the dimension of length. Yet if you look at complexity, the human brain is, if we could see complexity the same way we can see light or light energy from combustion or nuclear radiation, then a human brain would be one of the brightest things in the entire universe. In terms of complexity, this entire galaxy, if it were uninhabited, it's basically a very simple thing. It's just mass whirling around. You can describe it with very fewer bits of information compared to, let's say, describing the neural connections in a human brain, where you have something like 100 billion neurons, and each neuron has some thousands of connections with each other neuron. So the permutations are, 100 billion to the 1000th power or some crazy thing like that. And each neuron basically would take a significant microprocessor to just reproduce the action of one neuron with its thousands connections, each pulsing at, in the millisecond range. So you need to handle 1,000 signals of millisecond frequency. That's basically a significant thing for a microprocessor. Then you have 100 billion of them. And of course, the scientific dogma of the day is that would then give rise to consciousness, this collection of microprocessors. But it is a key anomaly of science that it has no room for consciousness as a phenomenon. Physics is consistent with the absence of consciousness. It does not imply consciousness. That is like the key anomaly of this age, which has some scientists seem to appreciate that as an anomaly, but some accept the dogma that, eventually we just have enough microprocessors and sufficient algorithmic programming, and consciousness will arise. And that perhaps is really the dogma of the age, and in the future people will look back and say, how could they be so naive? So to see the anomalies is really hard, for the ordinary action of science, publication and research. But pursuing the anomalies is really where progress happens. So some anomalies that are been pointed out are consciousness is one, and dark matter is the other. And I would say synchronicity is another anomaly. Carl Jung's acausal connection mechanism. There's something fundamental in the universe, that synchronicity of phenomena, which is the link between our mind and external phenomena, where we see nature mirroring our our internal states are mirrored in the external world. And so here's if you look up New Atheism, they're using Nietzsche, Freud, and Marx as the old atheists. Now we have Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins, and this guy, I don't know, as the new atheists. And they, of course, have good points that religion is a refuge for wishful thinking, etc., etc. But Nietzsche would argue with them for sure, as he did encounter God realization in 1889 on his hike through Sils Maria, which is a story in itself. But so it could be that religion is a mechanism or a tradition that encounters as vast a universe as science does. And here we see a representation of that once you realize that consciousness is a key anomaly not located in the brain, but the brain is either a receptor or involved in this non-local field, then we see that we are significant. And that is, to me, the ultimate astonishing hypothesis of religion, is that it matters to the entire universe what we think. You know, after 30 years of studying religion, it seems to me to boil down to that. It matters to the entire universe what we think. And in that sense, we are ultimately significant, since there is no annihilation in science, there is only transformation.